I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Strength Spotlight on strengths-based podcasting with Rhonda Boyle, recorded on February 25th, 2016. Strength Spotlights are live interviews that Gallup conducts with individuals, teams, or organizations that are using the Clifton Strengths Finder and its 34 themes to impact their community and organizations around the world. If you have questions, please email them to me or to us here, coaching@gallup.com. And don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your StrengthsFinder resources and training needs. You can also catch the video on both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening to all of our Gallup webcasts located at the Coaches blog. That's just coaching.gallup.com. Rhonda Boyle is one of our guests today. Rhonda is the founder of Yellow Sub Group. That is a professional coaching and consulting company based in Oklahoma City. Of course, they use StrengthsFinder and the EP10. Yep. And it's in the whole area there, Rhonda, right? I mean, you are dominating Oklahoma City for StrengthsFinder, right? And has one of the largest, or probably maybe the largest meetup group in Oklahoma City. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Jim.
Good to have you. Rhonda brought a friend today, and we want to welcome Jason Baffery to our podcast. He's the principal and producer of Destiny Creative, an Oklahoma talk company, also based there in Oklahoma City, and he's a producer, which I think is pretty cool. So, Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jim. I'm excited to be here.
Good to have you both. Rhonda, let's start with you a little bit. This is 3 in a multi-part series that we're talking about podcasting as an option for businesses, especially our strengths coaches in those communities, to be able to really extend the outreach of what they're doing from a coaching perspective. We've had Grace and Andy on early in the very first one. Lisa Cummings was on just recently. You talked about her podcast and what she does. I know you're doing it a little bit. This is the cool thing about this, is everybody does it just a little bit different. And so I invited you to come on and to answer some questions. So when you think about your podcast and what you're doing, why? What is the why? Why do you do what you do? It's a little extra work. We'll talk about the mechanics here in just a few minutes, but why are you doing your podcast?
Oh my gosh. You know, Jim, it does not feel like work to me at all. I'm sure you know that. We have similar talents, and so anytime I get to talk about StrengthsFinder, I'm such a strengths nerd that I just love it. And so the real why is to really offer another opportunity for educating people, because that's what we do. We educate through the people that I interview, just learning about how their talents show up in their lives. And so it's an opportunity to do that and to get our name out there, you know, about what we do, and to really evangelize about StrengthsFinder, which is what I do.
So you mentioned it's easy, and you and I share 4, and actually the exact same order. 4 of your 5. Why don't you quick go through and what are your top 5?
Sure. My number 1 is ideation, woo, maximizer, activator, and communication, and then activator.
There you go.
Yeah.
And of course, we just swap. You have ideation number 1. I have arranger number 1. So we swap those. So neither one of us are ever short on words or pass up an opportunity to do something like this. This is my second webcast of the day, and I'll do 5 in 2 days. So we never pass up on opportunities to do that.
Right.
So how long have you been doing it, and what was the early genesis of it? Why did you? I mean, we talked about the why of the business, but what got it going for you?
Well, what got it going was a friend of mine introduced me to Jason, and they were looking for good content on Oklahoma Talking Co., which is what he owns through Destiny Creative. And so we had sort of a little interview, and he liked what I had to say. He had never taken the StrengthsFinder test even when I talked to him, but he had probably, Jason, I don't know, I'm speaking for you. You looked through the website maybe or whatever. So it was one of my clients who had done quite a bit of work through with us. And so it was, for me, something that I saw as an opportunity to create more content, to put on my blog, or to, you know, just get out there. And so, yeah.
Rhonda, how long have you been doing it? When did you start?
We started in July, and we started it as an every other week show, and then very quickly, probably, I'm going to think by October, we moved it up to once a week, because it was there are so many people here in Oklahoma City, I mean thousands that we have worked with, and so it was easy to find people going, I want to be on the show, and so that's how it evolved. So we've got it down pretty pat, and it's simple and easy, and it is easy.
Jason, for you, what do you bring to the table? When we think of the traditional podcaster, they've set all this stuff up themselves. They bought a microphone. They bought the computer. This is a little bit of a different scenario because you're actually a company that kind of provides the infrastructure. So when Rhonda comes in, what are you providing for her?
Well, and it was interesting, if I can step back just a little bit, as Rhonda mentioned, a mutual friend kind of introduced us, and I met with Rhonda. She had never done a podcast, but it was kind of a dream of hers. We had just launched Oklahoma Talking Company early last year, 2015, and we were looking for other content providers besides just me. And I met Rhonda, and as you can tell, and you know her well enough to know, she's a dynamic personality. She has a gift of gab. She radiates when she comes into the room, and she's pleasant to be around, and she lights everything up. And I said, this lady is a superstar, and we have to help her, carry out her dream of a podcast. So basically what we offer Rhonda is a turnkey operation. She handles all of her booking and everything, but we handle all of the technical aspects. She comes in once a week. I have a studio set up for her. She comes in with a guest, sits down. We make a couple of adjustments, make sure the audio levels are good, and then she does her thing, which is her thing. She talks, she entertains, she interviews, she pulls information out, and she trains very well. But what I do is handle all of the knobs and make sure that she sounds good, and we put out the best product that we possibly can that looks good for the Oklahoma Talking Company, and more importantly, looks good for Rhonda and the Yellow Subgroup.
So there's a mutually benefiting relationship between you two from that standpoint, right? Because you need the content, she needs the delivery mechanism, and so that's been a relationship that's worked for you guys.
Yeah, it's worked out really great. We didn't know kind of going into it. She was very nervous about the whole thing because she had not done anything like this before. I have over 20 years experience in broadcasting as a television host and radio voice talent and live event announcer and all of that. So, but I have to say it hasn't taken a whole lot of training, just a little bit of tweaking. Rhonda is just a natural when she gets behind her microphone or in front of a crowd. And as I mentioned, she's an exceptional trainer. So that just comes out, and she brings out the best of people when she comes in for an interview. So my job is really quite easy, except, when I have to do the editing afterwards and everything, which isn't extensive, but just to get it sounding as good as it possibly can.
Jason, we have coaches all over the United States. Are you guys, I've never heard of a company doing exactly what you guys are doing from a podcasting standpoint. Is this something new? Are you fairly unique in the industry, or are you seeing other stations like this open up?
There are a few out there, and there's of course some bigger names. NPR does a lot of things like that. If you go to Adam Carolla, who's a TV star and comedian, he launched a network where he's producing multiple shows, and so we kind of looked at some of those models, but we took it to a local basis. I host a show that's focused locally here in Oklahoma City, interviewing some of the movers and the shakers and the interesting people, artists, musicians, that sort of thing. That's called the OKC show. But we wanted to branch out from there to provide not just local content, but content that would be worldwide and effective. And so when Rhonda came in with StrengthsFinder, I could see the value in that for people, not just in Oklahoma City, but for people everywhere. And, she is a dynamic personality, and I knew that she was the person to carry that message, and we would have a great relationship together. And I've learned so much just sitting in on the interviews with her, because I'm in the studio with her and I hear the interviews, and I've learned more. I've taken the StrengthsFinder test. I've learned about my top 5, and I've been to Rhonda's 101 class and kind of learned the initial elements. But I've learned so much just being in the studio and hearing her pull these things out of the different people that she works with and trains. It's been an exceptional opportunity for me.
Rhonda, do you have any idea on how many you're reaching with something like this? So, as podcasters, we're all pretty crazy about our stats, but have you looked out and you have some kind of feel for how many are listening?
I really don't. It just depends on who I interview and how well they spread the word, because I post it on, my Facebook fan page and on the blog and everywhere and on my personal page. Twitter. It gets pushed out through that also on LinkedIn and so forth. So we push it out, and what will happen is if we have somebody really popular come in, then they will go to town, telling everybody about it, their mama, their dad, their grandma, and so that it really kind of depends on that. So I am not really as concerned about the numbers. I probably should be, but that's, numbers are not my thing, Jim.
No, I know. We're not good at numbers.
Number 32, so no.
Yeah. And Jim, I meant to pull the numbers before I came in and then didn't get it done. But, we probably, just based on hits on our website, because we host Rhonda's show at Oklahoma Talking Company, so we look at the hits on the website. So, it varies. I mean, some shows could be 500, some shows can be over 1,000. All of her content right now has been local based. I mean, interviewing people that are here in the Oklahoma City metro area. We are going to be branching out and start doing more Skype calls where she can interview, coaches from around the country, other people from around the country. I expect some of the numbers will go up there, but we also, we host it at our website. It's posted on SoundCloud. We carry it on iTunes, so it's in multiple locations. So it's kind of hard to conglomerate everything. Yeah. But, I think we're getting decent numbers for a little local show that we do here.
Yeah, and anytime you're in a niche, which StrengthsFinder, we even say here, at Gallup, we're in a pretty hyper niche because it's StrengthsFinder, it's for coaches or for strength enthusiasts. That's a pretty tight niche, and podcasting is still one of those things. I think when we talked to Lisa, she was, somewhere between 1,500 and 1,800, which is some really good numbers. That's actually a little more than we do. Sometimes here. So I was just trying to get a feel for, the hosting standpoint, and both Grace and Andy and Lisa's case, they self-host. Jason, you're providing that service for Rhonda, taking the complication out of that piece and kind of being able to let her kind of focus on content while you guys are focusing on the back end. Rhonda, what have you seen since you started doing it? So this is time-shifted material. It is now February, so you've been podcasting about 7 months. Have you seen any changes to your business in this? Because the why of what you're doing, you said that. Have you actually been able to see or measure any changes kind of based on the content that you're providing?
Well, again, measurement is not my thing, right? Sure. But it does get more people. I have seen new people, like we get into different networks that we, I have at the Strengths 101 workshop that we do, in fact, we're having one tonight, there will always be new faces. And so they find out it's word of mouth. And they will pick it up from, other people who are out and about in the marketplace. So, I mean, StrengthsFinder is really big here in Oklahoma City, at least in the niche of the small business community. So the Chamber of Commerce arena, that's where a lot of the people, we're picking up people who are independent professionals. And so I've had corporate interviews, I've been able to present inside corporations because someone introduced me, they got introduced through the work, and then they introduced me to the business owner, and I got to go in and do a presentation and so forth. So we have things in the works. It takes time to develop that, to actually, know exactly where it comes from, because like Jason said, we've got it pushed out on so many different platforms that I can't tell you exactly which connection, but, for me, as a promoter,
Yeah. Well, and Ron, you kind of said, we have this, I do some podcast consulting on a show we call Ask the Podcast Coach, and we always have this segment called Because of My Podcast. And you kind of mentioned one right there where you said, hey, because someone heard this, I was able, I met somebody else, and that led to a corporate engagement. Have there been any other instances that you can think of where, as a direct result of the podcast, something happened that probably wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been doing it?
I don't really know that I can clarify that or nail it down. I mean, just today, for an example, I got tagged on in a Facebook group that I wasn't even a member on, and when I popped on over there, it was someone I do not know who is connected to me somehow, who said we should have Rhonda Boyle as a guest. And so, I've joined the group now and posted my stuff, and I have an interview with the lady tomorrow. So, that I can't say that it came directly from the podcast, but I know that it came from social media. Can we use that? Because for sure, that's really how we are pushing content out there constantly, either through the blog or through the podcast or so forth. So,
well, your social media and podcasting begin to blend together. That's kind of part of the problem, right? Is it all kind of becomes one thing. I think you'll start to see more of that. Have you gotten any direct feedback from listeners of it? In other words, somebody sent you an email and said, "Hey, I heard you say this. I want more information."
Yes.
Have you gotten that kind of stuff? And maybe just give me an example.
I get that all the time. Although I'll tell you, Jim, my kids still do not want my autograph. I just can't even figure it out. You know, I'm like, girls, and they're like, it's on the it's on the birth certificate, Mom, so we don't really need it anyway. But no, all the time I get people, and especially depending upon the guest that I have, and again, how well they help push it out there. I will meet their friends, or their friends will tag on to the post either through the Yellow subgroup or through my personal page or even through Oklahoma Talking Company, and they'll post comments about what a great job so-and-so did on the show and that type of thing. So I do know that we have started actually recording the show through Periscope, because it takes, obviously, when you're dealing with a professional like Jason and that caliber of podcast, it takes time for him to go through and edit, and you understand that whole process, I'm sure. So because it takes, sometimes there's a couple of weeks in lag in getting it out there, I think in probably early December we started periscoping our views, and so that has been fun, because we've seen people in Russia and in Singapore and literally all over the world, and we've seen that grow. Like the first podcast, Jason, I don't know if you remember, I think we had 7 people on it,
Yeah.
And so now we're pushing up into, and this is in Periscope world is tiny, but we've watched our numbers grow every single time we do a Periscope, and we tell people to send us love, and I think that probably helps Periscope push it out there more, and so that's fun. So we really kind of, because we Periscope also, we get sort of a double, our opportunity to get it out there, we get it twice. So we push it out through Periscope, and then on the day of the show, and then so a couple weeks later it goes out through audio through SoundCloud.
And I would say that I was a little hesitant about the Periscope idea, because I'm a video professional, and I think about, if we're going to put this on video, I want to do a show. Well, let's have a set. Let's do the whole thing, and of course that takes money. But Rhonda's like, well, let's just try it, and what it has offered is a fun kind of behind the scenes look while we do the show. And so I've had to change my mindset a little bit as a producer to accept that, okay, we're not putting out the perfect polished product here, but it's a fun behind the scenes, and we can act up a little bit before and after, and give the people that tune in get a little bit extra when they watch that, and then they can go back and listen to the show to delve deeper into the content.
Mm-hmm. And that any mistakes that happen on the Periscope's gone in 24 hours. So, it's not like we have anything hanging out there that's sub-quality. It's just fun, and I think that behind the scenes look, a lot of people appreciate that.
Yeah, they like to get that. I always see it as just very disposable, right? It's kind of disposable media. You do it, you get the best you can, you hope for some impact. It's not intended to be the pro version of it, Jason, what you're saying.
Right.
The pro version of it. But you can gain viewers in that way. Let me just say, for those who don't know, because some of the coaches who are listening to this have no idea what Periscope is. So Periscope is a media service available on Android and iPhone. It's an app that you can start. It's one-way video, so they hear you and see you. You can interact with the audience that's watching via the like instant messaging that's below. Yes. Although it's super hard to do that, to be honest with you. The Periscope
we don't do that.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult to do that. But I Periscope my son's Marine graduation. It's his boot camp graduation. All 2 hours of it, we Periscoped. It's out there for 24 hours, and it's gone. It was a way for folks who couldn't be there to watch it. So it is another medium that you can use. That Meerkat is the other version of that. There's 2 versions that are out there to gain kind of some social influence. So it's kind of fun. It's one of those things I always say, give it a try from that standpoint.
It was easy. I could even do it. You know?
And it's a fun way to engage. I do want to caution, it is a little unrestricted from that
Yeah.
standpoint, and so you're going to pick up people from all over. You got to be okay with that, right? That's
Yeah.
one of those kinds of things you have to be okay with when you get started. Jason, from a mechanics standpoint, when you're thinking about all the stuff that has to go into it and put it together, do you think is your setup there kind of average guy setup, or is it above? Because you're an old radio station guy, do you have kind of a better setup than most people would have in going
Um,
into it?
yeah, I mean, we don't have the top-notch setup that I would ultimately like to have, but we probably have better than average. I mean, we do run into a MacBook Pro, but we have professional microphones. I use Shure microphones and Rode microphones that run through an interface instead of just being regular USB microphones. So, but the technology today, I mean, it has changed so much over the years that, I mean, the fact that you can even do podcasting or plug a microphone directly into your computer and get pretty good quality audio. I mean, anybody out there can really do it themselves. They just have to spend a little time learning a few things. But the nice thing about us is, Rhonda doesn't have to worry about that at this point in time. I mean, eventually she may get tired of me and want to learn how to do it all and stay in her pajamas at home. But
I promise that's never going to happen.
For right now, we offer a pretty good setup, and hopefully, when the guests come in, they're treated to what looks like a professional setup in our studio. It is not the nicest studio in town, and it's not the worst. I don't do it in the closet, so I would say it's a little more than average guy. There is a little bit of money invested in some better equipment, and if people want to take it to the next level, nothing is inaccessible that we have.
Okay, and do you know? So if I was Rhonda and I was kind of thinking about how much I would typically pay for something like this on a per podcast basis, if you're comfortable talking about that,
Sure.
I'd love to give kind of podcasters ideas of what the kind of investment if they're going to outsource this, because not everybody's going to want to do it. You're the first interview we've done where they're not doing it themselves. And so, Jason, what would be a typical, and I don't even know how you charge on that, but what would be a typical rate as we think about costs?
Yeah, basically the way we do it is a per episode fee, which is, I mean, we charge less than $100 to do that per episode, and then a little bit of a setup fee because we have to set up the SoundCloud and the iTunes, and there's time that goes into creating an intro and an outro and the things that we want to have included in that. That takes hours to put those things together from an editing standpoint. Right. And finding the right music and, whatever you want to put in there, it takes time. So it's a reasonably priced effort for us doing it, for somebody who's outsourcing it. I think it's very reasonable, especially if you get the return on the social aspects. They get their name out there. Rhonda gets, to double up on her coaching. She can do in-person coaching. But if people in Oklahoma City or anywhere else want to delve deeper into their particular strength, if they have woo as their top 5, we probably have at least 3 great shows with woo people that they can learn these 3 different types of people and how they activate their woo. So, and she goes through everybody's top 5, so there's a little bit of something for everybody who's into the StrengthsFinder.
And then if there's any advice you'd give to Rhonda right now, anything she's not doing that you'd like her to see her doing, or are there things in the future you're looking forward to that you think may yet still be coming?
No, I really think that Rhonda has done a fantastic job for having never done it before. Her interviews are great. They're, we're on we do a 30-minute show. She is down to the second almost in her timing in her head. I think it's always engaging. It's always fun and entertaining. She does a great job mixing up the guests and their strengths. We've had, single people in here that talk about their woo. We've had married couples in that talk about how their strengths work together with each other. So I think there's a little bit of something for everybody. I think, especially being involved in your podcast, Jim, the next step, I think, would be us doing kind of a more high-profile video type show, and going to that level at some point. But again, those things come with, it takes money and time to do things like that, and but we hope that we reach that point at some juncture.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I want to say, you're building a cache or an asset bank of material, right, Rhonda? I mean, now you have, how many have you done? What number are you on at this point?
We're on about 15.
Okay. So you have these 15 items, right? You have these 15 30-minute bits of audio. And you're only audio, or are you doing video just through Periscope?
Yeah,
Right.
audio only, and then Periscope video.
Yeah. And so, Rhonda, how do you, when you approach these from an actual show content, do you have a standard set of questions that you go through, or you script the first couple out? How's that work?
Well, I do a pre-interview with everyone, usually a day or two, sometime before the show, and it is exactly follows the format. The first show that I did, I'll tell you, I really thought I could just kind of wing it. And I got halfway through, and I'm like, time out, Jason. I got to regroup here, because I was, anxious and didn't know what I was doing. And so from that point on, I really figured out exactly how to manage exactly 30 minutes. And when Jason says we hit it to the second, I'm telling you that we are rarely off, are we, Jason?
No. Hardly ever.
No, I mean, it's like almost to the second, exactly 30 minutes. And so what I've been doing is I, make my introduction, and then the person tells us their top 5, and then I want to know what their experience was when they first heard about the assessment, because so many people think it's just another test. And so I like to have a little clarity around there. Some people they don't want to they didn't want to take the test, or that's just kind of fun, learning how they came to the test or to the assessment. And then we go over each one of their talents, and I find out exactly how it's used in their life, or how they see it showing up in their lives. They give us real experiences, and in a lot of cases they give us application. Like when I first started doing this work, this is where I was, and now I'm here. A lot of the people that we work with, they come in and they've had renewed their relationships because they finally understand their spouse. And so we get to talk about those kinds of things. And some people change jobs right after they take the assessment and start working in it, and we learn about that. Or they move into a different space and we find about those things. But it really is about the top 5, and then after we're finished with that, I just ask their advice. If somebody is new taking the assessment, what would you tell them? And usually that is to plug in, to go print their reports, and so forth. So we plug Gallup quite a bit on during the show.
Do you find
to have that?
Do you find they share it pretty readily in their own social circles after they've been on the program? So after you produce it, you put it on the site, share the link with them. Do you find you get some feedback from that as well outside your circles?
Yes, that's what I'm telling you. It does get spread to, aunts, uncles, grandma, cousins, people that we would never have access to just because we have the access to the podcast. So I think, it really depends on the person and their talents. Mm-hmm. Some of us naturally promote, and some of us don't. So it just depends on their, theme dynamics, whether or not how much they're going to share, and how many times they're going to get it out there.
And just our most recent show we released, her number 1 talent was Woo, and within 5 minutes after me pushing it out through our social media channels, it went everywhere. I mean, I was getting notifications from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, she was pushing it everywhere. So, there are those people, and especially the Woos, they really get out there and get on it in the promotion.
Sure.
Oh, for sure. Rhonda, you mentioned notes. I showed this earlier to you guys, but I keep notes in everything that I do. I've done 500 of these things, and you still can never have enough notes, right? I still, in almost everything that I do, I still put some ideas down on paper before we go, because you never know, right? You never know getting into this where it's going to go, how it's going to go. You always want to have some backup information, available, those questions, because there'll be moments you kind of lose your mind. And you're like,
well, and I take notes during that pre-interview. That's what's so important, is because the pre-interview does 2 things for us. It gives them a sense when they come into the studio that, hey, I've done this before. This is like no big deal. It's exactly like she said it was going to happen. And so that sets them immediately at ease in the studio. And then the second thing is that when we're talking about each of their talents, they may have told me something, the day before about a story, and then they forgot to mention it because all of a sudden they were cued to tell me something else. And then I can say, but you also said that this happened. So the notes I take into the studio from the pre-interview give me my talking points during the show. And sometimes I'll have them flesh out something a little bit, go a little bit deeper into something. So
I'm actually a little careful in the pre-show not to talk about too much because you find there's this weird element that if you've talked about it once before in the same day, it's not as good the second time you say it. And so
I don't think we have that problem much.
Well, Jason, I'm sure in radio you've seen this too, where that content is fresh the first time. And and so I've had guests say to me, talking, I'm like, whoa, hold it, let's talk about that, because there's a little bit of excitement in the voice that comes across.
Sure.
Rhonda, last question from me to you. What kind of advice would you give if someone was thinking about doing this? And I'm not going to hide the fact we're trying to spur on our coaches to create podcasts. That's why I'm doing this series. Some of you who are listening to this now through our regular channel are like, why the heck is Jim throwing this in the Call the Coach channel, right? Why is he doing this? Because I'm hoping we'll get a few more podcasts out of it. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's thinking about doing it?
Well, I would say like in my experience, it's to find someone who can, if you don't know anything about the equipment, and trust me, I cannot be more grateful for Jason, because all those bells and whistles, and he just works magic, and I see that machine over there doing all sorts of things. I could not do it on my own. I really could not do it without having a partner. I wouldn't want to, because it's not my wheelhouse. It's not. So find someone who is maybe already doing podcasting in your area through, the networking community or so forth, and approach them about, because if they love podcasting like you do, Jim, you would love to run shows for people, probably. I mean, if it wasn't already something, well, you're doing that already, right?
Yep, we do some of that.
So that's what I would tell them. And then the other thing too, even though Periscope is a temporary thing, I mean, it's so easy. I wouldn't need help doing that. It is temporary, so, it's not going to stay out there, but that would be an option. And just explore some of these options for getting yourself out there, and spreading the good news about StrengthsFinder, because it's so exciting. And now we have the EP10 to talk about, and we've got people starting to rally around that and get involved. So that's, just find the people who are doing it.
Good.
And look for ways to work with them.
Yeah. Jason, I'll ask you the same question from a pro side. You're coming at this. What kind of advice would you give if there was a coach that was thinking about doing this? What kind of advice would you have for them?
Well, it's very similar to Rhonda. I think if they've never done anything before, if they're not tech savvy, find somebody who's involved doing a podcast and either partner with them or at least get some training from them. I mean, with a simple microphone that you can plug into your laptop, you can get going. It may not be the most professionally produced podcast, and that's really kind of depends on the person as to how they want to put themselves out there. If you want something that's produced, there's got to, if you're in a major market, you can find somebody that's doing some podcasting and learn from them, or maybe even partner with them, such as Rhonda has. Aside from that, there are a variety of technology options, apps, and things out there that enable coaches to be able to get their message out these days. Doing a simple video and pushing it out through YouTube or Facebook, using Periscope or Meerkat or Blab is another one that's come on the scene. Even if it were just a quick 5-minute hit, I think for a lot of coaches, if they're looking to expand their network, expand their influence, it's going to be good for them to do something like that to share their message with a more broad audience.
So what I like about this interview is that we believe with StrengthsFinder that everyone has these unique talents they're good at, and if you don't have it, you outsource that right. If you don't know how to do it, you outsource it. And Rhonda, you have done that in this case, and so we this is a great example of that. We're going to interview Keith Baldwin in a couple weeks, and he up from Alaska, and he actually used a kind of a web hosting provider that wasn't on site. It wasn't in the same town. But they it was a package deal, so we're going to talk about how he did that in Pretty fun to see 4 different ways of doing it, and all of them
Right.
being very successful. So, Rhonda and Jason, thank you for taking a few minutes this afternoon to be on. And
Thank you.
I want to remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center, just gallupstrengthcenter.com. You can send us your questions or comments in an email, coaching@gallup.com. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones we've done, including the links to our Facebook group, YouTube page. Everything we do socially is on our coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com. I want to remind you that we now have StrengthsFinder apps available for both Android and iOS. Just search StrengthsFinder in either one of the stores, download those, and always have your top 5 with you. Great way to take it on the road if you can never remember it, and some people can only remember 4 or 5, so it's a great way to have it with you at all time. Gallup has an entire schedule of site training available as well all around the world with a brand new site if you just head out to courses.gallup.com. I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll look forward to the next Strength Spotlight. I mentioned Keith Baldwin will be with us, and we'll talk about his journey through podcasting. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.